Over 25 centuries ago, a man engineered for absolute political power abandoned his throne to wage a war inside his own mind. At Siddhartha's birth in Kapilavastu, priests predicted two paths. He would become a world-ruling king or a world-transforming Buddha. To ensure his son chose the crown, King Suddhodana initiated a strategy of total sensory isolation. The physical remains of this strategy still exist in the ruins of Tiwanaku. These ancient brick foundations mark the fortified capital where the Sakya clan attempted to build a world without a single glimpse of suffering. The king constructed 3 distinct palaces for the summer, winter, and monsoon seasons. He filled them with musicians and attendants, creating a frictionless existence where any concept of decay or illness was systematically removed. For 29 years, Siddhartha lived within this artificial perfection. It was a carefully maintained thesis that life could be permanent, pleasurable, and entirely devoid of pain. The first rupture in this illusion occurred during a royal plowing ceremony. While watching the fields, the young prince saw the earth turned over, revealing insects that were immediately consumed by birds. This unscripted moment of violence troubled him. He withdrew to the shade of a jambu tree, where he slipped into a spontaneous state of deep meditation, momentarily transcending the sensory noise of the palace. We can view Siddhartha's life as a structural progression. His sheltered youth represents a thesis of pure indulgence. But for a final synthesis to occur, that thesis must eventually collide with its opposite. To prevent that collision, the king reinforced his son's earthly ties. Siddhartha was married to Yasodhara and trained as a warrior noble, further embedding him in the obligations of the Sakya state. The palace had become a psychological pressure cooker. The more luxury Suddhodana applied to keep his son anchored, the more intense the prince's underlying sense of existential restlessness became. At 29, the prince finally drove his chariot past the guards and through the eastern gate. He stepped out of his father's script and into the uncontrolled reality of the city. On this journey, he saw an old man and a sick man. In these two encounters, the lifelong assumption that youth and health were permanent states was destroyed. The third sight he saw was a corpse. For the first time, Siddhartha realized that death was not a distant concept, but an inevitable fate for everyone he knew, and for himself. This realization triggered samvega, a terrifying sense of spiritual urgency. The comforts of the palace now felt like a distraction from a house on fire. His panic only subsided when he saw a fourth sight, a serene ascetic. This provided the single piece of evidence he needed, that a path out of this suffering might exist through discipline and detachment. These 4 data points acted as the antithesis to his entire life. The palace was no longer a sanctuary. It was a cage that obscured the true nature of the human condition. Siddhartha returned to the palace as a newborn son was presented to him. He looked at the child and saw another life that would be subject to the same decay he had just witnessed in the streets. He named the young boy Rahula, meaning fetter. The name was a public admission of the conflict between his duty as a father and his conviction that he had to find a way to end the suffering of all beings. That night, he watched the dancers and musicians asleep in the hall. In the flickering light, their disheveled forms appeared grotesque and lifeless, turning the palace into a graveyard before his eyes. He stood at the threshold of his wife's room, watching her sleep with their son. He resisted the impulse to wake them or hold them, knowing that if he didn't leave now, he might never find the resolve to walk away. He chose to leave his family not out of a lack of love, but because he believed that staying would only preserve a cycle of grief. To find a cure for death, he had to sacrifice his own life as a husband and a prince. He slipped out of Kapilavastu at midnight on his horse, Kanthaka. This stone relief depicts the scene, with deities supporting the horse's hooves to ensure he could escape the palace in total silence. After crossing the river Anomia, he cut his hair and swapped his princely robes for the simple clothes of a hunter. He was physically stripping away every marker of his royal identity. He sent his charioteer Chandaka back to the city with his ornaments and horse. By delivering these items to the king, he signaled that his departure was final and his life as a prince was over. He entered the woods alone, without money, a title, or a map. He had moved from a world where every need was met to one where he had to beg for his daily bread. The Great Departure was a deliberate plunge into the dark antithesis of his youth, a systematic search for the cause of human suffering in the heart of the forest. For 6 years, he practiced extreme austerities, eventually fasting until he could feel his own spine through his stomach. But as his body withered, he realized that a mind clouded by the agony of starvation was just as trapped as a mind clouded by the fog of luxury. After accepting a bowl of milk rice from a village girl, he understood that the path to truth lay in the middle way, a balance between the indulgence of the palace and the self-mortification of the forest. Sitting beneath a peepal tree in Bodh Gaya, he vowed not to rise until he understood existence. This site is now marked by the Mahabodhi temple. Facing Mara's temptations, his own internal illusions, he remained unmoved, tracing desire's roots to reach total enlightenment. This golden image captures the Bhumi Sparsa Mudra. He touches the earth, calling the ground to witness that he had finally integrated life's truths. Siddhartha had completed the dialectic. By facing the darkest realities of old age, sickness, and death, he established a blueprint for liberation that has survived for over 2,000 years.